A Senate hearing just exposed the most outrageous government cover-up you've ever seen. The Palisades fire, the costliest disaster in world history, was entirely preventable. Reservoirs sat empty for 11 months. Fire crews were ordered to abandon a smoldering fire days before catastrophic winds hit. After-action reports were doctored to protect politicians. And here's the kicker. Not a single person has been fired. Not one resignation, no accountability whatsoever. 2 veteran fire chiefs just testified under oath that California leadership manufactured this disaster through incompetence, then covered it up. And the receipts are devastating.
Funding is reduced. What's the impact on local capacity to foresee and prevent, as well as to recover from natural disasters like Palisades?
Local capacity for emergency management is already at an extremely low level. Argonne National Labs did a study that highlighted this. But when you start reducing funding for communities that are already at risk, especially our small and rural communities, that can be, those federal funds, those federal grants could be the lifeblood that enhances and operates their local emergency management offices. And so this shift in funding, or the unknown of funding, can be very detrimental to how we as local emergency managers protect our communities and keep our neighbors safe.
Just as one example, federal reimbursement for vehicles used in fighting wildfires is important, is it not, to local authorities?
Yes, any federal funding that locals can utilize to help enhance our emergency management operations are critical to what we do.
Mr. Chairman, I want to note that there have been delays, as I said in my opening statement, to local governments and authorities all across the country, including Florida, Louisiana, Connecticut, and yes, in California, despite numerous requests from California's congressional delegation, the administration has yet to transmit to Congress the state's request for $33 billion in a supplemental appropriation for wildlife recovery. I share your concern, Senator Johnson, about the victims of that wildfire. I invite you to join me in asking the Trump administration to release that additional federal aid. You can respond later or now. Thank you. Mr. Hawkins, would you say that your views on the importance of this federal funding are shared by your colleagues in the International Association of Emergency Managers?
Yes, it is. As the chair of the Government Affairs Committee, we meet once a month and we discuss legislation and what's going on the federal level. And like I said, we have representation across the country, small cities, small towns across the country, and federal funding can and is extremely important to what we do, and helps take some of the burden off of our local governments. And so, yes, that sentiment is shared by our community members.
Let me ask Chief Butler and Mr. Crawford, would you agree that those federal funds, in particular FEMA funds, are important to preparing for and preventing the effects of natural disasters and then recovering from them? Chief?
For me, local disasters start at the local level. That's been my experience throughout my career, and then it moves up to the state from there. After we're in a mode where we can no longer manage something ourselves at the local level, then federal support comes in. I've personally been involved with putting forward declarations. You're not always guaranteed to get the funding. So when I run an incident, I don't make it with the assumption that I'm going to get reimbursed. But it definitely helps, and it definitely helps with some of the long-term work we do on the fire ground. But the disasters are local, and it starts at that level.
I appreciate that. It definitely helps.
Yeah, I agree with both points. To piggyback on Chief Butler's point, it does start at the local level. And in my experiences where we have a raging fire that's going on and there's a determination that has to be made within a certain period of time to request to make the request of the fire management assisted grant that has to go out. And so in my experience, I've been the one that's starting to facilitate that, knowing that that may be the possibility that has to be worked out later. However, the thing of it is that this is bigger than just California. This is something that happens that's going on across the country. And that's why I mentioned the all-risk governance doctrine, is because this starts to put together the type of framework that handles things prior to the incident, during the incident, and then post-incident in a disaster recovery authority type of framework. And so I just think that we should, or feel that we should be looking at this from a broader perspective, using California as a very much a case study, because we do have all different types of incidents that occur there that do not occur in different sections of the country. Again, they do start locally and they do end locally.
And that's exactly the point I'm making. It's much bigger than California. These delays have been disastrous. $33 billion for California, billions in Florida, Louisiana, Texas, Connecticut, all across the country. The cuts and cancellations. You at the local level have to plan. You can't be guaranteed of reimbursements, but they are critical for communities across the country. Let me ask you, Mr. Hawkins, in the time I have left, laying off cadre of on-call response recovery staff at FEMA. These drastic cuts, have you seen the effects?
Not personally in my community, but I do know that post-disaster, a lot of our communities who have local emergency managers and local emergency management offices who those staffing numbers are very small, rely on that on-call FEMA Corps staff to come in and support the local emergency managers in the immediate recovery and immediate response and recovery operations.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
So before I turn it over to Senator Scott, let's make something clear. The reason California is requesting $33 billion of after-action support is because of the utter incompetence and failure of Los Angeles and California elected officials. Let's be clear about that. This is $33 billion that should not be needed. Ms. Hawkins, I want to quick ask you a question. Because again, it seems like it's all about federal funding. What percent of a normal city, let's say at Los Angeles' fire department budget, comes from local government or state government? What percent of the total fire department budget?
I don't have visibility on a specific government.
Would you have any idea what it is on the police department? I mean, the emergency responders. You know what percent is paid for by state and local funds versus the federal government?
That's going to vary community to community across the nation.
Senator Scott, let me ask you, because you're former governor. Isn't it true that most local fire departments and local police departments are funded by local resources and state resources?
Mostly local. It's not even
a huge percentage, right?
Yeah, it's almost all of it. You're not relying on the federal government. You can't. It's something completely outside your control.
The federal government.
If I can just add a point.
No, not right now. The 39. We're almost $39 trillion in debt.
Right.
The federal government is bankrupt. Most of these funds are provided by local and state, as is the hierarchy of emergency management. It starts with local and state. FEMA does finance after these disasters occur. Some of them are unpreventable. Some, like the Palisades fire, is entirely preventable. So the American taxpayer is going to be, I'm supposed to join in a request for $33 billion because California leadership utterly failed, and they were running budget surpluses to huge budget deficits. I'm sorry, we have to start questioning this when we're $39 trillion in debt. With that, I'll turn it over to Senator Scott. Thank you.
Chief Butler, I understand that one of the major obstacles firefighters faced when responding to the Palisades fire was simply getting there. The Palisades neighborhood's on the outskirts of LA and has a lot of winding, narrow roads. I got to drive on some of them. Traffic was gridlocked when panicked residents tried to flee, and there was no sort of, as what they explained to me, and you look at the video, there was no evacuation plan that anybody seemed to follow. Some questioned when I was out there, they said, well, if the fire department knew there was a fire risk in the area, why didn't they pre-deploy trucks with water, and especially knowing that the reservoirs were empty, why didn't they pre-deploy trucks and firefighters? So can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, and specifically, what I'd like to focus on is what they did before. And so pre-deployment, I used to tell folks, it's not a slogan. It's we get the resources in there quick and early. And because you have forecasted winds in advance. So what I would do in my commands is when I knew this was going to happen or I had the winds in advance, we would put resources into those communities. First, it's better protection, limits, to your point, the response time, and it also allows us to get a jump on any fire. But all of these plans are actually well written and documented and trained. In every promotional exam I've taken in this department, you need to know the Palisades plan, the evacuation plans. So it wasn't that they didn't exist, it's that they were not executed upon. And once the fire got started,
Let's be brutally clear about what just happened in that Senate hearing room. Chairman Johnson asked the simplest question imaginable. Has anybody been fired? Has anybody been held accountable? Has anybody resigned? The answer from both fire chiefs, no. Think about that. The most expensive disaster in human history. 13 people dead, 23,000 acres burned, 7,000 buildings destroyed, $33 billion in damage, and not a single bureaucrat, politician, or department head has faced any consequences. Chief Butler, 32 years with LA Fire Department, assistant chief before retiring, said it plainly, you can't have a disaster, the most costliest in history of the world of scale like this, and not anybody get fired. But it gets so much worse. The Santa Ynez Reservoir sat empty for 11 months. 11 months. It was one of the primary helicopter water sources for fighting fires in that exact area. And it just sat there, dry, for almost a year. Someone knew. Multiple people knew. The Department of Water knew. The fire department should have known. Southern California Edison should have known. Every utility company, every emergency coordinator, they all had 10 days of advance warning about life-threatening winds. And nobody filled the reservoir. Chairman Johnson demanded to know, whose responsibility was it to make sure that reservoir was full? Who was supposed to ensure the Lockman fire got fully extinguished? Chief Crawford laid out exactly how the command structure works. There's a battalion chief on scene, in this case Mario Garcia. But the decision to pull fire crews away from a smoldering fire doesn't stop with him. He reports to superior officers. They report to the command staff, 9 deputy chiefs, 99 total chief officers in the department. Somebody in that chain of command ordered firefighters to roll up their hoses and leave a fire burning in dense brush with forecasted 80 mph winds coming in days. And we still don't know who made that call. Chief Crawford was emphatic. This is a leadership failure that goes all the way to the top, not just at Chief Garcia's feet. So where does the buck stop? We don't know. Why don't we know? Because the after-action reports were doctored, not speculating, not conspiracy theory. The chiefs testified under oath that the department staff created their own preferred narrative. They pulled out information that wasn't particularly flattering to political leaders. Chief Butler confirmed he read multiple drafts. The early drafts were honest. They documented the failure to pre-deploy resources, the decision to send firefighters home instead of holding them over, the complete breakdown in coordination. The final version, according to the department's own admission, it was watered down to protect reputations. In their own words, California state law requires after-action reports to contain all this information. The law says you have to document what happened, who made decisions, why things failed. That's how you prevent the next disaster. They violated their own state law to cover for politicians. And Chief Crawford drove home why this matters. Sometimes your first draft is always the best draft because by the time you get to your final draft, you've pretty much stripped it of stuff that you should have left in it to begin with. The person who wrote the original report has publicly stated it was highly unprofessional for the department to alter it. But let's talk about what actually should have happened, because the playbook existed. The training existed. The plans were written, exercised, and proven effective over decades. Chief Butler was directly involved in developing operational plans for the Pacific Palisades. He personally executed them during prior wind-driven fires in that exact area. Every promotional exam in the LA Fire Department tests you on the Palisades evacuation plan. This wasn't unknown territory. This was the most prepared-for scenario imaginable. Pre-deployment doctrine is institutionalized in that department. When you have a 10-day advance warning of life-threatening winds, you flood the zone with resources before the fire starts. You position engines in neighborhoods. You staff up. You extend shifts. You activate emergency management systems. Chief Butler testified he's done this over 30 times in his career. It's not complicated. It's not some experimental strategy. It's basic operational doctrine, and they just didn't do it. The department deployed less than half what was normal and customary. Chief Butler brought bar charts showing historical deployments. None of the prior incidents had weather anywhere close to this severe, and yet they deployed fewer resources than they had for smaller threats. The final after-action report claimed they went above and beyond the standard pre-deployment matrix. Chief Crawford tore that apart. It never showed what the matrix levels are. This was supposed to be a historically dangerous situation. Most of the department has never even heard of a particularly dangerous situation designation. This cannot be business as usual. They needed to be off the charts in preparation. Instead, they did less than normal. Chief Butler explained what should have happened. When forecasted winds are coming, you get resources in there quick and early. Better protection, faster response times, you get a jump on any ignition. The plans are well written, well documented, well trained. It wasn't that they didn't exist. They were not executed upon. Once the fire got started without pre-positioned resources, it became unmanageable. A wind-driven fire at that point is unrealistic to stop. Pre-deployment is exactly why you prepare, so you don't end up in that situation. So why didn't they pre-deploy? That would be a leadership decision, Chief Butler testified. And that leadership decision came from somewhere in the command structure, either the fire chief's staff or the mayor's office. We know this because battalion chiefs don't make those calls alone. They report up. The decision to not staff properly, to not pre-position engines, to send people home instead of holding them over, those are command-level decisions. But here's the thing that should enrage every taxpayer. It would have cost almost nothing to prevent this. The LA Fire Department has about 1,000 firefighters on duty at any given time across 3 shifts. To properly staff for this event, they needed 126 additional personnel to man 42 extra engines. Senator Moreno did the math. A couple $1 million. Maybe. A couple $1 million would have prevented $33 billion in damage. Let that sink in. $2 million in overtime could have saved $33 billion. But somebody decided fiscal savings mattered more than public safety. The request apparently never even reached the mayor's office. They used their own budget line item for overtime and decided to save money. And where was the mayor during all this? Ghana. The mayor of Los Angeles was in Africa while life-threatening winds bore down on the city. Senator Moreno nailed it. I look at what Senator Scott did as governor of Florida, what Governor DeSantis did, on the ground every day, managing the troops, making certain you were ready before the storm, during the storm, after the storm. Florida rebuilt the West Coast in a period of time that seemed unbelievable because he was there. The presence of leadership is non-negotiable. You can't have the person in charge of the city disappear to another continent when you have 10 days of warnings about a catastrophic event. A press conference on January 5th from the mayor should have told citizens what to have in go bags, how to evacuate, what alerting tools to sign up for, what resources the city was deploying. Citizens get behind that message when it comes from leadership. Instead, silence. The mayor was in Ghana. The deputy mayor for public safety was on administrative leave, and the disaster unfolded exactly as predicted. The Lockman fire from January 1st was never fully extinguished. It became what's called a holdover fire, a well-known, predictable hazard in that terrain. Chief Butler has fought about 20 of them in his career. The protocol is simple. Nobody goes home for at least 5 days. Water on the ground, dig out the roots, make absolutely certain it's dead. That is not rare. That is expected, Chief Butler testified. When forecasted 80 degrees winds arrived on January 7th, the unmonitored Lockman fire predictably reignited and spread rapidly. What followed was not unforeseeable. It was the expected result of leaving a holdover fire unmanaged in a densely populated, high-risk community, Chief Crawford confirmed. Absolute failure to follow basic processes that are standard across the industry, and nobody has been fired. The person who wrote the memo equating the Lockman fire as low priority? Still employed. The officials who altered after-action reports? No consequences. The command staff who decided not to pre-deploy? Promoted in some cases. This is what accountability looks like in California. Protect reputations, doctor reports, blame the weather. Except the weather was forecast 10 days out. The National Weather Service issued repeated warnings. Fire weather intelligence clearly identified the Pacific Palisades and the still smoldering Lockman fire within the projected impact area. This was not a surprise. This was not an act of God. This was a leadership failure. Chief Butler said it perfectly. When leaders act early on known risks, disasters are prevented. When leaders delay, defer, or minimize risks, disasters are manufactured. The Palisades fire was manufactured by decisions made before the wind arrived, and now California is asking for $33 billion in federal disaster relief because their leadership utterly failed, then covered it up. Like, subscribe and share. This story deserves to go everywhere.